Have you ever watched a South Korean movie called Exuma? The film delves into allegations that the Japanese Imperial Army used feng shui tactics to weaken countries they intended to conquer by planting cursed objects in specific locations. This raises a question. Did Japan employ similar strategies in other nations they occupied in the past beyond the Korean peninsula? The story you're about to hear seeks to address that possibility. However, it originates from an anonymous source who provided no documented evidence to support these claims. With this in mind, approach the tale with a healthy dose of skepticism. The jungles of Kalimantan had always been a place of both wonder and danger, where dense foliage concealed untold mysteries. For Arya, a contractor originally from Tarakan but now based in Jakarta, his latest project appeared straightforward. A luxurious resort development on a secluded plot near the Indonesian-Malaysian border. The project was high-profile, the client wealthy, and the stakes monumental. Yet from the moment Arya stepped onto the site, events began to unfold that would challenge the very fabric of his beliefs. The site was breathtaking. Nestled at the foot of Mount Harun, it promised tranquility and exclusivity to future guests. But one feature marred the picturesque landscape, a colossal uyeolin tree, centuries old, its roots sprawling like the tendrils of an ancient beast. The client, a Singaporean with a strong belief in feng shui, insisted the tree had to go. Its energy, they claimed, was all wrong. Locals, however, vehemently disagreed. They warned Arya and his team that the tree was sacred, a guardian of the land. Removing it, they said, would invite calamity. Yet money spoke louder than warnings, and Arya's company had already committed to its removal. Arya had begun to notice troubling patterns within his company, especially on large projects. Office staff like Arya were often kept away from construction sites during the early phases under the guise of logistics meetings or the need to clear groundwork. But Arya had started connecting the dots. Every major project was shadowed by accidents, mysterious illnesses, or even deaths among labourers. Incidents brushed off as unfortunate but not unusual. Whispers among workers suggested otherwise. These deaths were sacrifices to ensure the project's success. The Kalimantan project fit the pattern perfectly. Trouble began soon after the first wave of workers arrived to clear the land. Malaria swept through the camp, claiming 3 lives within weeks. Yet the uyeolin tree stood firm, defiant and untouched. Chainsaws couldn't penetrate its bark, and labourers who tried to fell it fell violently ill or entered inexplicable trances. One by one, they succumbed to what seemed like madness, clawing at themselves and muttering in strange voices. Frustrated and facing mounting delays, the project manager, Surya, abruptly ordered Arya and his team back to Jakarta for an internal meeting. This struck Arya as odd. Why remove the team during such a critical time? But orders were orders, and they left. Upon arriving in Jakarta, there was no meeting or briefing, just silence. Days later, when Arya and his team returned to the site, they were met with grim news. Another worker had died, crushed by a piece of heavy machinery. Other than that, things remained as usual. The mighty uyeolin tree still stood tall in the middle of the construction site, with no one able to cut or even damage it. Then one evening, he overheard Surya on a heated phone call with the company's CEO. Unseen, Arya listened in, and what he heard chilled him. The CEO's frustration was unmistakable.
"We've already given 4 people, and I don't care how you do it. Find a way."
Arya froze. Given 4 people. The words carried dark implications, suggesting the deaths were not random but intentional sacrifices. As the project stalled, Surya brought in a spiritual expert, a dukun named Kung Kung. An elderly man of Chinese-Indonesian descent, Kung Kung was renowned for his knowledge of ancient rituals. Upon seeing the uyeolin tree, his expression darkened. "This is no ordinary tree," he warned. "Its spirit is strong and does not wish to leave." Kung Kung prescribed a puasa muti, a purification fast, for everyone involved in the project. Participants were to eat only plain white rice, bread and water during daylight hours, and abstain from all food and drink from sunset to sunrise. Financial incentives convinced the reluctant workers to comply. For 41 days, they endured this grueling regimen. Finally, the day of the ritual arrived. Kung Kung prepared offerings, paper talismans with Chinese characters, bowls of blessed water, and began circling the tree, chanting incantations while shaking a ceremonial rattle. The air grew thick, oppressive, as if the jungle itself were holding its breath. Workers watched in tense silence as Kung Kung lit a fire in a metal drum and burned the talismans. Then, heating a ritual blade until it glowed red, he slashed the tree's trunk. The bark split open, oozing thick, crimson sap that resembled blood. The crowd gasped, but their awe turned to fear when Kung Kung suddenly froze. His eyes widened and his voice thundered as he demanded, "Who has broken the fast?" Uneasy glances were exchanged, but no one admitted guilt. Kung Kung's rage was palpable as he pointed his blade at Gusti, one of Arya's colleagues. Pressured, Gusti confessed. He had eaten at night to take medication for a chronic stomach condition. Kung Kung's face contorted in anger, but before he could act, his body stiffened. His head jerked upward, and he let out a guttural laugh. The Dukan was no longer himself. Speaking in an alien tongue, Kung Kung laughed maniacally before plunging the blade into his own chest. Chaos erupted as workers fled in terror. Kung Kung collapsed at the tree's base, his blood mingling with its sap. The company quickly ruled Kung Kung's death an accident and spent a fortune suppressing the incident, but the nightmare didn't end. Days later, Pak Rusti, a senior manager, revealed something chilling. He had recognized the language Kung Kung spoke during his possession. It was Japanese. Rusti, having worked extensively with Japanese contractors, translated the words. "You lowly humans dare trespass on this land. This place is cursed and none of you can break it." Desperate to resolve the situation, the company flew in a feng shui master from Singapore. The master examined the site and declared that the tree's energy was too strong to be cut directly. He suggested using herbicides to kill it slowly. Workers drenched the roots with gallons of chemicals, but the ritual only seemed to provoke the entity further. Those handling the herbicide began to convulse, pouring the toxic liquid onto themselves in a frenzy. Others who tried to help were also possessed, their screams echoing through the jungle. Amidst the chaos, the master walked toward the tree, his movements slow and deliberate. He knelt before it and began speaking in Japanese, his eyes rolling back into his head. The remaining workers, terrified, fled the site. When they returned with ambulances, the possessed laborers were in critical condition, and the master was dead. His heart had given out. Months passed after the chaos at the construction site. The once mighty ulin tree, poisoned by the herbicides, had withered into a gnarled, lifeless husk. Its roots, once defiant and immovable, had begun to disintegrate, and the land seemed eerily silent. It was Pak Rusti who made the call to move forward, proposing one final act to rid the site of its lingering presence. Arya, now back in Jakarta, received the update with a mix of dread and curiosity. Rushdie intended to unearth whatever lay beneath the tree, this time with the assistance of 5 religious leaders, representatives of different faiths, each armed with prayers and blessings for what they might find. The excavation began at dawn, the jungle around the site cloaked in mist. Workers, their faces pale and apprehensive, stood back as the religious leaders encircled the dead tree. They murmured prayers in unison, their voices mingling with the rustling of leaves. The air was thick, heavy with an unseen weight, as if the earth itself resisted being disturbed. It was Pak Rusti who signaled the excavators to begin. As shovels struck the soil, a low mournful sound seemed to emanate from the ground, though none could pinpoint its source. The workers exchanged uneasy glances but continued digging, each strike of the shovel growing heavier, each breath harder to take. It took hours to penetrate the dense network of roots, but as they dug deeper, the earth gave way to something unnatural, a dark, solid mass buried vertically among the roots. "It's a coffin," someone whispered, their voice barely audible over the pounding of hearts. The workers stepped back, leaving the final unveiling to the religious leaders. Together they cleared the remaining soil, revealing an ancient blackened wooden coffin, its surface etched with faint, illegible markings. It was unmistakably Japanese. The leaders chanted louder, their voices trembling as they performed blessings to cleanse the site. With painstaking care, the coffin was lifted from the ground and laid on the clearing's edge. Pak Rusti, his hands trembling, gestured for the lid to be removed. As the nails were pried loose, the jungle seemed to exhale a long, mournful sigh. The lid creaked open, revealing its contents. Skeletal remains wrapped in the decayed folds of a black kimono. The fabric, though frayed, still clung to the bones, its delicate embroidery barely visible. A single kanzashi hairpin rested in the skull's brittle locks, its once bright enamel faded but intact. The design was intricate, a lacquered bloom tipped with sharp metallic edges. It seemed to glint menacingly in the dim light. One of the religious leaders stepped forward, his face ashen. This is no ordinary grave," he said, his voice trembling. "The kanzashi is a curse, a tether meant to bind this soul to the earth." As the leaders continued their prayers, one elder explained the sinister history. During World War II, Japanese soldiers had performed rituals in occupied lands to ensure their dominion extended beyond the physical realm. They used women, often geishas or comfort women, as vessels for these curses, burying them alive with cursed objects to anchor their spirits. The hairpin, he said, was one such object, meant to sow discord and suffering wherever its shadow lingered. The air grew colder as the story unfolded. One of the workers swore he heard faint whispers emanating from the coffin, though none dared confirm it. The leaders worked quickly, performing rites to remove the curse and cleanse the land. The hairpin was carefully removed and burned in a consecrated fire, its ashes scattered to the winds. The skeletal remains were wrapped in white cloth and reburied in a new grave, accompanied by prayers for peace. But even as the rituals concluded and the site was declared cleansed, an unease lingered. Those present felt the weight of history pressing down on them, as if the ground still carried the scars of what had been buried there. For Arya, the news of the discovery confirmed his worst fears. He left Kalimantan for good, unable to shake the memories of what he had witnessed. The Yulin tree was gone, but its story remained, a chilling reminder of the lengths to which power can corrupt and the unseen forces that guard the past. The land, though cleared, seemed to carry a perpetual shadow, as if it mourned the secrets it had been forced to give up. And for Arya, the haunting image of the black kimono and the cursed kanzashi would remain etched in his mind, a stark warning against disturbing what should never be unearthed.